Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
Let's talk abortion, because there are many states in the U.S. that are now, they seem to be racing to pass laws on abortion. And perhaps the end game, as some people are saying, is to overturn Roe versus Wade, which allowed for abortion until a fetus is able to survive outside of the body, the woman's body. So what does Islam say about abortion? Some people have said, well, this is the Christian version of Sharia law coming to the United States. How would you respond to that?
That's a misrepresentation. There have been a variety of Muslim scholarly views on the question, but if we were to put it in a nutshell, we would say that Islam strikes a balance between two extremes. One extreme saying that the child could be aborted even up to when the fetus becomes viable, and on the other hand, saying that abortion is not allowed at all. So those are the two extremes. In between, we have many Muslim scholars say that based on some classical indications from Hadith, when the embryo reaches the stage of 120 days old, that's when the soul is breathed into the embryo. And at that time, we have basically a real living soul here, and to abort that would be a travesty that could only be allowed in case the mother's life was in danger, in which case we'd have to preserve the primary life and just sacrifice the less primary one.
So that's around 120 days, you're saying?
That's 120 days.
Okay.
But of course there are variations on that. There's been a minority of Muslim scholars in the past that have held that the 40 days is the cutoff point, thinking that the soul is actually breathed into the embryo at 40 days old.
Because how would you be able to tell if the soul is breathed in or not?
We wouldn't be able to tell by our own observation, except that there's a hadith that says that the embryo develops like that for a period of 40 days, and then like this for a period of 40 days, and then like this for a period of 40 days, and then the soul is breathed in. So we can add those up. It comes up to 120 days. But another way of reading the same narrative says that, the conjunction between the this and the that and the that does not imply a sequence, but it could be understood as overlapping. So this happened, and moreover, this happens, and moreover, this happens. So it's really talking about the same 40-day period. So this is why we have the two different interpretations. Basically, one saying 40 days, and one says no, it's 3 times the 40 days, 120.
So when I look at what the different scholars have said and the different schools of thought, it seems to me that there's a great disagreement. People are saying different things. Scholars are saying different things about when you can actually have an abortion, when you can't. And there's nothing in the Quran, of course, that says, there's a certain cutoff date.
Yes. To be clear, the Quran speaks very clearly against killing the child that is already born. And this came in opposition to a known practice at the time where families got rid of unwanted baby girls. But this is after birth, and of course this is despicable. And the Quran is clearly against that and says that these parents will be brought to justice on the Day of Judgment for killing the innocent child.
I believe the Quran also says, you shouldn't get rid of your child for the sake of poverty,
That's right.
So.
And for this reason, Muslim scholars will say that even when they're permitting abortion in a limited way, it should not be done for, and even contraception should not be done for the fear of poverty, like we fear that God will not provide for our child. Of course, a Muslim would not enter into such an action with that mindset, but they're cautioning against this. Don't practice contraception or abortion with the idea that people are going to be poor or God will not be able to provide. Of course, God will provide. But getting back to the nuances of how abortion is dealt with by the classical Islamic tradition, if we were to simplify it, we would say that let's think first of all about the period before up to 40 days. So many scholars rule that within that period of time, it's basically permissible. The most lenient in this regard are the Hanafi scholars, scholars of a particular school known as the Hanafi school. The most strict are the proponents of the Maliki school. So Hanafi school basically thinking is permissible, Maliki school thinking, no, wait a minute, there's a problem here. But we're talking about
Is there a reason? And do you have to provide a reason? Does it have to be a pressing need to have an abortion?
The more lenient scholars on the spectrum will say that up to 40 days you don't even need a reason.
Okay.
But now, if you think about between 40 days and 120 days, now given the opinion that it's 120 days when the soul is breathed in, here we're more into a gray area that requires more pressing circumstances for the fetus to be aborted. And then after 120 days, the only acceptable excuse would be, or the only acceptable justification for the abortion would be a real danger to the life of the mother.
Of course, a woman would most likely not know that she was pregnant, until after 40 days, right? Because early on, nobody really knows, right?
Yes, yes. So this is why sometimes we need to look at the broad spectrum and look at the situation that we're actually dealing with on the ground, and then form a judgment on that based on that situation. So the Muslim attitude is not to proceed in a wanton manner, just do whatever we like, whenever we like. We always act in a way that reflects our consciousness of God, our consciousness of morality and ethics, and we proceed in a way that takes all of this into consideration, knowing that we're going to be accountable before God for all of our actions, and this is not a light action. You're snuffing out a child's existence here, or a potential child, and
because I think in Islamic law it wasn't considered an actual human being, like full human being. Right? So let's say if somebody commits a wrong and they might have to provide compensation for it. They wouldn't have to provide compensation as they would for, let's say, killing a full human being, right?
Yes, yes. And naturally there is a great difference between the embryo in the womb and the child in hand. The child that's already born, this is clearly a viable child.
Yes.
That which is in the embryonic stage, there are many contingencies and unknown factors about that. If I'm to use a common everyday example, there's a lot of difference between an egg and a chicken. An egg could potentially be hatched into, a chicken, but a chicken could potentially be hatched out of an egg. But breaking an egg is different from killing a chicken. We break eggs every day for our omelets, but you wouldn't break chickens, right?
So what's your advice for an individual who, maybe found out she's pregnant and then, is considering abortion?
Well, some abortions sometimes might be considered because of very extenuous circumstances. Like, let's say, for example, a girl is raped and she will have to deal with that. Now, a decision has to be made. Maybe the girl will say, look, this is my own flesh and blood. I want to keep this child. Okay, that's a decision. But if this is going to be very traumatic for the mother, then a decision towards abortion is welcome, again, given the time frames that we talked about.
Have some scholars said this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and this is commonly considered in many Muslim-majority countries as well as a reason for allowing an abortion in specific cases. We can have, if we're talking about the first 40 days, then even lesser issues might be at hand. Maybe it is thought that another pregnancy will be coming too quickly in succession for a mother who's already nursing a child. It may be thought that having another child may be placing the family in difficult circumstances. An older woman who possibly might become pregnant, but at the same time, pregnancies at an older age might be more risky. There is more of a possibility of genetic abnormalities and so on. So all of these could be factors in families working together and in mutual consultation deciding that it's better not to have a child at this time. And if we're talking about the period within the first 40 days, there is more of a latitude. As I said, with the precaution that in the Maliki school, a more strict ruling is sought, and one would think that you would have to have a greater level of excusability in order to justify an abortion in that school. But most of the other schools are a little bit more lenient, especially the Hanafi school.
So much more we could talk about, but we're running out of time. Thank you, Dr. Shabir
You're
Ally.
welcome.